10,580 HIV cases were reported in Bolivia between 1984 and 2013. This is an epidemic concentrated among some high-risk groups and in the most populated Bolivia's departments. Migration within the country or abroad in search of better work opportunities, widespread tuberculosis and the stigma attached to HIV could all be hiding the real face of HIV in Bolivia. Living well with HIV. Demanding our fair right. HIV doesn't discriminate. Some people live with the virus and don't know they have it. Others have HIV as a consequence of being raped or from unsafe blood transfusions. And the vast majority got HIV as a result of combined alcohol drinking and having risky sex. For many people, HIV was the only thing left over after being in a relationship they believed was based on love and mutual faithfulness. Most people never believed that they could get HIV because they did not consider themselves as part of the so-called high-risk groups. Discrimination and stigma is commonplace for those living with HIV. At work, in their health center, and even in their own home, they are subjected to abuse as a result of the lack of information and education about how to prevent the disease and what it means to live with HIV. People with HIV need to take antiretroviral drugs every day, but these are difficult to access and expensive. The cost of treating one person with HIV for 1 year is around $10,000, which is impossible for most people to pay.
The cost of treating one person with HIV for 1 year is around $10,000, which is impossible for most people to pay. The antiretroviral drugs we take or don't buy, the Global Fund, and are generic, which means that they have the same active ingredients as the brand name antiretroviral drugs, but don't go under the same name. The cost of these generic drugs is around $400 per person per year.
So, we have to understand that the investment should of the state, public institutions, in this case, the municipalities that are required by law to do so, the governorates, the Ministry of Health, should supervise this via the National AIDS Program. The investment and minimum compared to the benefits and social gains that we will receive if we guarantee that people living with HIV not only have access to the antiretroviral drugs, as stipulated in the law, but also to medications and treatment for opportunistic infections. In a lot of health centers, sometimes due to ignorance but more, probably because of a lack of will, people living with HIV are not treated properly, arguing. The law only mentions antiretrovirals, but let's not forget that it also talks about comprehensive, multidisciplinary health care for people living with HIV.
Funding from the Global Fund runs out in 2015, and we don't know whether our country will be eligible for further funding, as Bolivia has now been classified as a middle-income country after having eradicated extreme poverty.
Thanks to us setting up REVBO, we got this fabulous gift from the Brazilian government, a donation of antiretroviral drugs for Bolivia, and thanks to the activism of the people working in REVBO.
The current government has an empty discourse, saying that they support the marginalized, the poorest, the civil society groups, with a human rights discourse in quotation marks. But in reality it is not responding effectively with economic resources. What we really need is economic resources to respond to the epidemic. Prevention is sustainable over time, because it ensures that people do not get HIV, and ensure that people living with HIV can live for many years, contributing to the country.
I think we should talk about the health care of people with HIV, but also of the general population. Because public health in Bolivia is not being attended as intended by the Constitution. One of the fundamental bases of the Constitution is the right to health and life should be a priority of the state, is mandated by the Constitution, and we want this to be met. Dedicated to all the people who died of HIV in Bolivia while waiting for the government's response. Living well with HIV, demanding our fair right. A production of the Bolivian Network of People Living with HIV/AIDS, REVBO, with funding from VIHvir.